level course. But all of that comes out of a book that's in the process of being written that was originally for STEM students who end up getting a lot of really good training and really good jobs and end up in a big company and then spend 2 years wondering what's going on, what are these people doing, why are they doing what they're doing, how does this place make money, how do what I do, how does what I do fit in? And so that's what we'll talk about. And so when we say cybersecurity, maybe I'll put a note for us where we could also just drop in here. And the first part of this, certainly, what cybersecurity is in business, why we have it, why it's important. Cybersecurity deals with risk. A large enterprise, whether it's for-profit or non-profit, when they're interested in cybersecurity, they're not curious about the technology. They're interested in cybersecurity because it's a part of the risk that they have to manage. It's part of enterprise risk management. And we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about what are other risks, especially when you get to the senior leadership in an organization. If you're in a business enterprise, what's at the very top of the house organization in a business, in a large business, in a corporation? Anybody? What do you typically hear about as kind of the top leadership of a big business? That's why I don't know names.
The CEO?
The CEO. Right? Does the CEO not have a boss? Who's the boss of the CEO? But ultimately, investors, the owners of the business. And in between, there's the board of directors. And the board of directors doesn't manage the business. They don't tell the senior leaders what to do, but they govern the business and they set priorities. And the CEO could be out of a job tomorrow if they aren't doing what the investors want. And the way they know what the investors want is by hearing what the board wants, right? So they get priorities. Those priorities include lots of different risks. We'll get into, as I said, we'll get into talking about a number of those different kinds of risks today. For the CEO, for even the direct reports to the CEO, going back to like the CIO and technology. For the board, all of those risks that we're going to talk about today, all of them could shut the business down. All of them could certainly do a lot of damage to the business, and we'll talk about the kinds of damage that can happen. And so if we're working in cybersecurity and we're concerned about the risks that cybersecurity presents to the business, when we go to talk to those senior managers, when we go to talk to the CEO, when we go to talk to the board of directors, we can't talk to them just in the world of our cybersecurity definitions and terms and technology. They're not curious about the technology. There may be one or two that are curious. Anytime you spend talking to them to satisfy their curiosity is time wasted, because their interest is in all the risks in business. And so we'll get into that later. And then after we go through all of that, you kind of will want to step back and say, well, okay, how? How does, like, if I'm working in cybersecurity, if I'm concerned about cybersecurity, how does that fit in if there are all these other things that could shut the business down as well? So we'll talk about how it fits in as well. And then a lot of businesses think about it in a way similar to this. And they do think that enterprise risk. They've been very late to the game, many of them, in understanding how cybersecurity is one of those risks and how it fits in. But they've started pulling it, right? Especially in the last 3 to 5 years. A lot of them have started to pull cybersecurity into the overall risk management process, governance, but it's not working well today. And we'll talk about what's not working well today. And then what we can do, how can we fix it? What can we do to make it work better? That's for me, the best part of standing here today and talking to you is it's hopeless for me to decide what things are going to look like 30 years from now. I will be gone. I will be gone. You hopefully will be here, and you will be the ones that have decided and put the effort into what things look like 30 years from now. And let's talk about it. We can talk about what we can fix. Some of it may take some time. Some of it can be changed very quickly as long as enough people come together and help to make it happen. And then, of course, everyone thinks, oh, those are all really nice ideas, but I need a job, and I need to eat, and I need to pay rent, and I need to drive my car around, or whatever I want to do, right? And I need money to do that. Okay, how does that fit with your career? How do you actually have a career work in one of these large enterprises, and then deal with all of this. So that's hopefully that's in alignment with what everyone expected to hear. If not, let me know. We can talk about pineapple pizza or okay, good. Does anyone know the pineapple pizza story? Everyone knows how to Google, right? After class, Google pineapple pizza. Don't do it. After class. It's a kind of a cybersecurity. Oh, and I will invariably click at the screen, but I should click at the or there we go. Okay. First thing, to a business, cybersecurity isn't as important as everyone in cybersecurity thinks it is. To a business, cybersecurity is a department or part of a department, like IT. IT is a department. Finance and accounting, their departments. HR is a department. What's a big difference between a department and the operating part of the business? What's one of the biggest differences? Because you're in a department. It's different about I wish I had eyes back. Oh, I can see the screen here. Okay, it is on. What's different?
I have
You can look at the screen. I can't go in there.
I would believe the departments are a part of the operation, they contribute to it, because the operation is the massive master, massive whatever that the enterprise does, but it needs to divide these different tasks into departments that take to pay, well, based on the work, certain sections of process.
To break it down, like into a work breakdown. So that's very true, very true. The branch of the whole, when you think of the whole enterprise, the branch of the enterprise where it's departments that are doing the work, and that's part of the work breakdown structure. There's one important thing that that part of the branch of the enterprise doesn't do. And that's this. They don't produce revenue. Cybersecurity group, unless you're a software, yes, everyone's like, wait, what if you're a software company that sells cybersecurity? Yes. You're a software company that sells cybersecurity. That cybersecurity produces revenue. For every other large enterprise, even IT, generally IT will support the part of the business that produces revenue, but IT doesn't produce revenue. HR doesn't produce revenue. HR supports the people that produce revenue. They don't. HR doesn't produce revenue. When you start getting up higher and higher in the enterprise, when you get above the level of departmental managers, when you get above the CFO, the CIO, the senior VP of HR, when you get to the level above that, those things are considered almost like necessary evils. The business doesn't exist to have HR. The business doesn't exist to have accounting. The business doesn't exist unless they're an IT business to have IT. They would exist to have accounting if they were in accounting. But I'm saying in general, the business exists to produce revenue so it can generate profit. The work that goes on in cybersecurity does not produce revenue. Most of the work that goes on in IT doesn't produce revenue. Some of your engineers in the room, you'll be involved in projects that build or design products that produce revenue. That's a very valuable part of the business. That's not viewed by the senior management as a necessary evil, but they know they need finance. They know they need HR. They know they need cybersecurity. If you're in cybersecurity, just as if you were in HR or in finance, when you go to get a budget for your group, when you go to ask for decisions to be made from senior management, if you don't go with the understanding that you're from a department which does not produce revenue, and if you're asking for an additional investment, that you're competing with a part of the business that can actually produce revenue, you're going to have a very hard time having that discussion. Have a very hard time having that discussion. Because it's not something that they care about. The way to present it, if you're in cybersecurity, how can you talk about what cybersecurity does to someone who cares about revenue? How would we talk to them? You could Google this. If someone cared about revenue and we were coming from cybersecurity, how would we want to talk to them?
You probably want to describe how they could be monetarily affected indirectly, like with the
Yeah.
cybersecurity access.
Yeah, we can help protect, we're not gonna generate revenue. But there are things that can happen that can destroy the revenue that you either earned or could have earned, and we can help protect it. And also, in the process of trying to generate that revenue or profit, you have all these assets, right? I'm sorry, you're gonna say something. Texting each other. So there are also all these assets involved, right? And the business needs those assets to generate revenue. And so cybersecurity can talk about protecting or negative impact assets. You will, if you get into the field of cybersecurity, you look at a lot of what's done in risk management field, you'll see that there are several different methodologies or frameworks. They all try to get down to an understanding of when there's a cyber incident, what impact could it have? The impact being, is it just going to lose revenue or impair the value of asset tourism? So the frameworks all look at what impact it could have, what's the probability of that impact, what's the frequency, will it only happen once a year, will it happen in a day? Multiply those things out, and now you get a way to put in monetary terms the value of trying to prevent that incident. That's the way to have a conversation. That's the way to have a conversation with senior management. When you go to talk to them about spending more money in cybersecurity, yeah, you're competing with someone who can generate more revenue, but there's also a probability that they may not produce the revenue they claim to produce. And if you can demonstrate that the probability of you protecting revenue is greater than the probability of them generating revenue, now they're interested in investing in your program, right? Makes sense? It's basic, right? It's basic. Once you think about it and you plant that, you sort of plant that seed in your thinking, it's hard to not have a conversation with people about it. Because you realize that's what they want. That's because that's what the owners of the business want. The owners of the business, they'd be collaterally pleased if there was a really nice cybersecurity business. But generally, the owners of the business, they're not going to be all excited. If the business is revenue is shrinking, there's no profit, but we have a great cyber. The owners of the business will not be happy. This comes from Orton. Anyone know who Orton is? ORITGADIESH. You can do that. Orton headed up Bain Capital, big private equity firm. And Orton wrote a great book. It's called Lessons from Private Equity Any Company Can Use. And this framework comes from Orton. It basically describes, as we said, the owners are the people that really get to decide what's going to happen. If the CEO is increasing the owners, then the CEO is out of the job. The business, typically the business gets investment from owners, and the investment is used to generate revenue and profit. But oftentimes that investment gets amplified by lenders, by banks. So the investment that's coming into the business is from the owners, but also from lenders. The difference is the lenders charge interest, and they always want to get that interest. So when the business is generating profit, it's paying the interest to the lenders, and after that, it's flat goes to the owners. The lenders, if the lenders did a good job evaluating the risk of business, the lenders are in a lower risk situation than the owners. Why would someone want to be an owner if they knew they could be a lender and just get a percent of the risk? Why would someone want to be an owner? Lower risk to be a lender. You almost reach your hands.
I would guess that more profit in the long term.
Yeah, you have higher risk, but with higher risk comes higher return. If the lender is getting 12% and the business is making 30%, then the owner gets a lot more, right? So you have more risk, but you get more potential return. This is why the owners, which choose the board, and the board, which chooses the management, they're very concerned with risk because they know they're taking on more risk, and they want to see reward. They want to see reward that way. There's two ways. When it's publicly traded company, then there's an intermediary group, actually tangential group, they're not even in the middle. Between the owners and the board, there are what are called investment analysts. Does anyone know what investment analysts do? I won't, I promise not to pick that anymore, but if someone knows, yeah.
I guess it's like person that tells you how much you invest for the best return possible.
Right, if you had a friend doing that, think of that relationship, but times millions of people. And so they typically work at investment banks. And their whole job is to watch companies in a particular industry to decide, is this company more or less valuable? Like how much should this company be valued at? Oftentimes you see them referred to as Wall Street analysts, right? You watch the news and someone's name comes up and underneath it says Wall Street analyst. Has anyone been to Wall Street lately? No, even pre-pandemic. Since a lot of people with selfie sticks and people walking dogs, right? There aren't any Wall Street analysts really. Deutsche Bank is still, I have an office on Wall Street. Thanks to Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank is still there. Otherwise, it's condos and tourists, but we still call them Wall Street analysts because many, many years ago, that's where most of these people's offices were. Wall Street analysts, when they go to think about how valuable is this business, they're breaking it down into the two things we talked about, growth and profit. For growth, it's nice if you grew 1 year, but they want to see it better. So they're looking at what's called private compound annual growth. Over the last 5 years, if we average the growth over the last 5 years, what does that look like? And how does that look compared to their competition? How does that look compared? If I were to invest in a company in this industry, would I get a higher compound annual growth rate on this one or on the others? And then earnings, profit, they will look at what's called, this is an accounting term, but you hear it a lot, EBITDA. EBITDA. Why would you look at EBITDA, not just straight profit? And the slide tells us for EBITDA. It's profit, it's earnings before interest, remember the lenders? Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, EBITDA.
Well, so it's like the raw profit.
Yeah, it's the business part of the business before we paid those people that like taxes dispute the way the lenders are. Like we're going to have to pay the taxes whatever, no matter what, right? They're not really there. But taxes sits in here with lenders. They're going to take their chunk of money out no matter what. So EBITDA is telling the owners, what are we getting back? What are we getting back from these people? So the analysts or anyone, someone who's investing lots of money, even if it's on their own, they're looking at what's the compound annual growth of this business as far as profitability and as far as revenue, and is there growth in the profitability? Is the profitability flat? If it's flat, is it reliable? If it's shrinking, probably not very interested. And if we go back to what are we doing in cyber, we're not adding the growth of revenue. And we're adding every time we go to get more budget, we're reducing profitability. But for those people who have a lot of risk, they might be okay with us reducing profitability if we can protect growth. If we can protect the business, maybe the business can take on more risk now and grow more than the company. Okay, so we talked a lot about cyber in business. Engineering, you're in a slightly different place. Depending on the type of engineering you're doing, you may actually, as I said before, you may be involved in something that's generating profit for the business, but there are also aspects of engineering where you may be in a department or a function, right? In which case, a lot of what we just talked about cybersecurity. So cybersecurity is helping to manage the risk of the business, the enterprise risk. When I speak with students who are spending all their time studying cybersecurity, they are convinced that it's the absolute worst risk a business could face. One person, I could get an email. Hey, look at my friend's kitten. Oh, I didn't even know your friend had a kitten. Click, boom, ransomware on my machine, across the network, onto everyone else's machine. ransomware. Boom, shut down, whole business, right? So cybersecurity people, it's the end of the world. It's the end of the world. Why did he click on the video? Right? And that's one person, one little click, one thing, right? It could happen anywhere, all sorts of activity. So they see the world that way. They see the world as all these horrible things could go on in cybersecurity. So many of them could shut the business down. What could be worse? What could be worse? What could be worse? We'll talk about 17 of them in a second. First, back to cybersecurity. Yes, it's important, but it has to contribute to the business. It has to align with business strategy, right? This is going to take more risk than that. If you're a cybersecurity major or you're studying cybersecurity, you know the CIA triangle, right? Anybody know the CIA cyber folks? No CIA triangle? CIA, I know it's an organization that we're not going to talk about, but it's also three things in cybersecurity: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Those are the three things cybersecurity tries to make work well in a business. That confidential information stays confidential, that our competitors don't find out what our plans are. That the integrity, like if we're going to look at payroll data and see how much someone's going to get paid, they're really going to get paid that amount of money, right? There's integrity in the data. And availability, if I need information to make decisions, that the information I need is available to me to make my decisions, even though we are concerned about confidentiality and integrity, it's got to be balanced with availability. Right, so a lot of that has to align with the overall business strategy. As much as it can, it should encourage automation and discipline around processes. Those things make the business better overall. So that all works. But in addition to a hidden video, there are other things that could shut a business down. There are other enterprise risks that those owners are worried about. There are other risks that could result in lost revenue or negatively impact value of assets, impaired value of assets. Anyone want to throw some out? I'm going to go through 17 of them.
Maybe social engineers entering, trying to steal information about companies, especially if people have on computers or.
Yeah. Although I might tuck that into cyber as well, right? What's an area we're all concerned about? A lot of people being in Scotland soon about that could shut a business down. Nobody cares about climate.
Okay, climate, yeah.
The wrong school. Yeah, climate, right? If our business is tourism and we're on the beach and all of a sudden there's no beach, we're out of business, right? So let's go through, we'll go through them quickly because I know we're okay for time, but I want to give some time for questions and answers. Well, all right, let's go through some. Reputation risk. Reputation. There's a company, you can Google this one later too as well. CRISP, C-R-I-S-P. That's all they do. It's people out of MI5 in the UK. They started out by looking at ways to help protect children online from people who were misrepresenting things to children, and that grew into this whole business that works with big companies to monitor everything that goes on, everything. If somebody in Thailand starts to post on a local, not even major social media site, a local chat board or something, a story about a product that some big company makes. Maybe a big company makes a food that everyone eats. And a little story starts and says, oh, I found a rat tail in that. Maybe the person, maybe they didn't, but they want to get a lot of clicks, right? And so what a business like CRISP does is they're constantly crawling, looking for those things, finding them, telling the company, better go deal with this. I mean, if there was a rat tail in that cupcake, you better help this person out, because if this goes viral, nobody's eating cupcakes for a while, right? So reputation is to totally shut your business down. Brand risk, it's related, not necessarily reputation, but just the brand itself, right? Companies spend a lot of money trying to build up brand. If you want to list, I'll make sure everyone has a slide. If you want to list all the different risks, I get this one. And every company is going to break down enterprise risk in different categories depending on their industry and sector. But there's another two of the slides. I think it's not simplicity.com. There's a website that breaks down these 17 areas of enterprise risk. Every company will categorize them differently. But brand risk is one, right? Who here knows what Reader's Digest is? You're nowhere near as old as you look. I mean, the other way around, you don't look anywhere near as old as you must be if there's no Reader's Digest. And in the back, you know, what's Reader's Digest? You raise your hand? You heard of it?
Well, I've watched a couple of videos like that. I don't know. It's magazine or something.
Yeah, they
There's
made
a lot of
books. They made there was a company for a while called Buck a Book, where you could buy a book for $1. And all those books came from Reader's Digest. Reader's Digest, which my friends at Reader's Digest, if we end up on YouTube video, I'm going to be getting emails. Why? But it's true. Reader's Digest would just make a book, like a bookmaking factory. Just grab content, put it together, grab some stock photos, put it in, make a book. If something became popular, if Great Carpet became popular, Reader's Digest would have a book about Great Carpet cooking out tomorrow, right? And they would try to gauge how many people want to read about how to make Great Carpet souffle. And they would print all these books up, and if they didn't sell them, the ones that didn't sell went to bucket. And people buy for $1. The reason no one else has heard of Reader's Digest is they focused on a certain demographic. They focused on an older demographic. When social media started taking off, they were like, no, we make books. That's it. End of the brand. They were basically selling to a group of people who every year more and more were dying. And they weren't that, remember revenue growth? Not a good model for revenue growth. And so basically, except for 1.5 people in the room, nobody's heard of these things, right? Brand risk, can shut it down. Sustainability is climate, right? We just talked about that before. Sustainability. Financial risk. If you're not watching your profitability, you might get very excited about growing revenue and maybe really grow revenue, but you're not watching your financial results and your profitability, you can very quickly go out of business. Some famous person who had hotels and casinos and steak. Oh, never mind. We won't get over it. Okay. Liquidity risk. What's liquidity? How's that different from financial risk? Liquidity risk. Liquidity, what's liquidity?
I think it's like.
I get a question from the dark side of the room.
Well, I think it's like financial risk, but without taking into account the assets, so it's like more like a cash flow.
Yeah. It is all about cash flow. And go back to that Dutch model. Between the investors and the business, there's the lender, right? If the business can't satisfy the lenders, that's it. Nothing's going to make it stay down to the owner, right? So the business has to watch that. Whether it's profitable or not, it's not. You'll hear the term leverage in business. Leverage means how much of the financing of the business do the owners sort of get to put on the lenders. The more of the financing of the business that's done by lenders, the more highly leveraged it is, meaning the more profit that there is after paying the interest, the greater the wealth the owners are going to get. But if you do that and it's too highly leveraged, the business can't satisfy the lender's interest, then that's it. When you go into default, you can't be your debt obligation. If you're watching this, Evergrande, anyone aware of what's going on in China with Evergrande? Anyone know what Evergrande? EERGRANDE. Yeah, big real estate construction. There are, I may get the exact number wrong, but the number I heard was in China today, there are empty brand new apartments enough to house 90 million people. because there's just been so much building and building in real estate. Evergrande just imploded 15, they had a whole community with 15 high-rise buildings, all 50 stories or bigger, and they just imploded 15. All empty.
City.
Yeah, they're whole ghost cities, brand new buildings that nobody lives in. This goes back to growth versus profitability, right? They were trying very much to grow, but they also got slammed with economic risk. They would have made a lot of money if the pandemic hadn't happened, the economies kept going where they were. China's economy stays. I feel like you're a catcher, and I'm like, okay. All right, I'm getting my symbols from over there. Now I have to watch both. So economic risk, right? China's economy is growing this year, but nowhere near as fast as we want. And then there's nowhere near the need for housing. And so if you were a highly leveraged organization like Evergrande, they're still solvent, but everyone's watching almost every week. I think they just satisfied a big debt payment, but they're getting extensions from their lenders. So they basically avoid going into default, but any business can fall into that. Operations risk, engineers know about this, right? You design it to work a certain way, the whole function of the feature spec out, everyone starts building it, the customer starts to hits it, the customer gets it, all of a sudden, oh, you wanted it to work in the rain? It said work in the rain, right? Oh, operations risk. It could take business down. And it can happen not just to the products you sell, it can happen to yourself internally, right? Your own business operationally runs into a situation that you hadn't planned for. This is another big one globally. What's going on in Los Angeles right now? What's going on outside the harbor of Los Angeles? The slides, go ahead. You need to get one answer. It's sitting there, right? Yeah, it's sitting there. I forget which port, Miami or maybe Charleston. One of the ports on the East Coast is trying to convince all those shipping companies to just bring everything over there. Like, okay, like down to the Panama Canal, all right, that's a big problem, right? If somebody thinks it's practical for you to start moving all your ships from LA to the East Coast of the US, you got some supply risk, right? And if you don't have enough supply, you can't produce the product, and you're not going to have revenue. And if you don't have revenue, and you have to satisfy the debt, you're not going to have any cash flow to do it, and you're going to run into all the other problems we talked about before. Health and safety, also health and safety for your own employees, for the people around you. There was a company many years ago, Union Carbide. I'm really old. I remember old companies. They were both these previous guys in Union Carbide were clients. But Union Carbide in Bhopal, India, had an incident at a factory that negatively impacted the health of over 20,000 people. People were like poisoned with chemicals, gases and chemicals, right? Something like that would just take your the business online. This is where engineers, I think, are going to play a much bigger role than cybersecurity folks, right? Cybersecurity folks make sure the systems that support health and safety don't shut down. But the engineers can help to make sure that the underlying operations themselves are well managed to protect against health and safety risks. Regular compliance risk. Compliance risk is, are we following the laws that are in place? We had a discussion about wind filters in California, right? And, I may be mistaken on this, but my understanding is that in California, there's regulation about capturing microfibers in dryers when you're drying your clothes, right? Small one, if you run a chain of laundromats and you have lots of dryers, there's a multi-billionaire who actually started out by buying up small laundromats and then kind of streamlining them and selling them. John Kluge. So if Kluge were doing that today and decided, well, we're not going to capture microfibers in the dryers of our laundromats, but it was against the law, that could shut the business down. Right? Legal risk, whether you're in compliance with the law or not, people could come and sue you. Many people come and sue you. They could put together a class action suit and basically take your business down. Right? And so there's also what's referred to as regulatory risk, different from compliance risk. Regulatory risk would be the risk that new regulations are put into place that change that imply that you need to change your business model. That your business model was designed in a world that didn't have those regulations in place, and now some new regulations come in. I think if you were watching yesterday on Capitol Hill in the US, they had the CEOs of big oil firms testifying, and one of the Congress people made a presentation and asked them, would you support limiting your access to public land, right? Would you support the new law? Of course, if you're down here, you either say nothing, which I think one did, and the other three said no, because they knew there was huge regulatory risk to them. But if they didn't have, they're basically getting subsidized by getting all this free access to land. And if the law changed, that would force them to change their business model, which they didn't want to do. Also, competitive risk, anyone can come along. If you, unless you have a secret formula that you hide, like you claim your carbonated drink has a secret formula and no one can replicate it, pretty much anybody can come along, see what you're doing, think about it, especially if you're doing something that you've done for a long, long time. If you're in a business you've been in for 20 years, there are probably ways to do it better. And if you haven't been finding those ways to do it better along the way, putting those changes in yourself, then anyone can come along and see those things and come up with a business to compete with yours that does it better, that does it cheaper, that then takes you out of business. Think about tax. We still have red taxes, right? But we probably had a lot more red taxes before Uber and Edie, right? And it was the same in New York, where I was living. There were yellow taxis everywhere. And if you wanted to drive a yellow taxi, you spent almost $500,000 to get a medallion, to get a kind of a shield that went on the hood that said, yes, this is the taxi. Those medallions are worth, I think, less than $35,000 now, right? Where maybe 5-6 years ago, they cost $500,000, right? And so any business, any business model can come under. Also strategic risk. We talk about the business, and so far in today's discussion, I've talked about business as if it's this thing that sort of happened a certain way, and it keeps happening that way, right? It happened that way in the past, and it keeps happening that way. But that's not the case. In order to get the growth that owners expect, most businesses have to come up with strategic projects to maybe add new products, get into new markets. Oftentimes they're doing acquisitions. Any one of those things, if they're thought about, if a lot of assumptions are made, or they're not thought about in a sound way, the strategy could fail, and then your business is at risk. And then programs and projects. Programs and projects go on all the time, whether it's for some new initiative or just to improve something that already exists. Right? Programs and projects go on all the time. What's a big difference between working on a project in a big enterprise and having a day-to-day job? What's a big difference? I know you were brushing your hair, but that's it. Right. And what happens at the end of the project? Or, yeah, another project, you don't have a job. At the end of the project, you don't have a job. So oftentimes, in big enterprises, they will take people who have day-to-day jobs and put them in a project. It's a very different mindset, right? Someone who wants to show up every day and do the same thing, they're going to have a hard time being in a job where, in 6 months, you have no job, right? You have, as you said, you have to go find another project. Or maybe your job creates a new job that then you can go into. So those things can fail. If you take people who want just very much to do the same thing every day, they will hope that the project never ends. And that puts your project at risk, right? Puts your project at risk. And then that becomes a drain on the business. The thing that you were dependent on the project producing doesn't ever happen, but also now you have this extra weight of this money that's being spent on a project that's not in. And then catastrophe. This is related to the one that we said about climate earlier, right? any kind of disaster can strike. We saw it in the east by Limon a month or so ago with all the flooding. Right, we see it all over. We see it with fires, all kinds of situations. Hurricane, always historically hurricanes, but any kind of disaster can strike, take out a lot of the assets. And then finally, the one that we started to talk about, information security. You brought up one complimentary one, the one we were talking about in cybersecurity. I would lump all those into information security. So you can see there's 17, at least by this list, 17 areas that if you were the CEO, if you were the board of directors, if you have to communicate back to the owners whether the business is at risk or not, there's a lot of places to talk about risk. And all those discussions are so different, right? Talking about liquidity, you're going to have banking people going on and on about banking terms. Talking about health and safety, you're going to be talking about people's personal health and medical conditions and poisons and all different terminology, different way of looking at the world. And cybersecurity, talking about different things, right? If each of those 17 groups come into the room and they start to talk about their area of risk in their language, nobody's going, the CEO will have no idea. The board of directors will say, who hired these people? Well, I don't have all these, this is the Tower of Babel, right? So the way it's discussed, anyway, cybersecurity, any risk, it's all discussed, it's brought back to probabilities and dollars at that level of the enterprise. At that level of the enterprise, it all comes back to probabilities and dollars. We talk about what happened before, what are some of the predictive drivers? What activity will generate this risk? Will selling a product generate it? Will paying invoices generate it? Will bringing on a new supplier generate it? What are the activities that will drive this risk? What do the owners expect? And then because we have managers involved in keeping the thing going, we have to deal with managers' desires. Oftentimes, because they're closest and they're there every day, the managers exert their own personal desires that make conflict with what the owners ultimately want. And so you have to be careful with that. From all those facts, the senior management tries to boil up some targets. They try to lay out what's the direction that we want this business to go. Maybe it's not working really well today, but we know we can make it into something that works well, that grows, that's profitable. And so to do that, they take what's called business as usual, BAU. Anyone ever hear this term, BAU? BAU. You'll hear it. No, I put it on the slide. I cheat all the time. BAU is business as usual. You will hear it all the time when you're working in a large enterprise. They will want to know, is that BAU or is that something new? Because if it's business as usual, then there's already a way that it was done. And maybe we have some data on that we can analyze to see if that rate is more or less efficient than our competition. But if BAU isn't doing it, we have to make some changes. We either have to change the way we're doing it, or we have to look at making some acquisitions. Maybe mergers and acquisitions, or some kind of strategic initiative. All of that ends up once a year in a budget. So when a big enterprise has a budget, the budget is all dollars. It's a breakdown of what's expected and the dollars and the headcount involved in increasing what's expected. But behind that, there's this whole algorithm of facts that came in, strategic direction, and an understanding of the business and the changes that are desired, but then focus that to produce the budget. But the budget is dollars. So to take those 17 areas of risk and have a conversation with senior managers about them, you have to have a conversation in dollars or whatever the currency is, right? You have to have a conversation in terms of the financial impact. Budget, kind of, you need it as a guide. The budget tends to be an articulation of what we want to have happen. Rarely ever really, like you make your own personal budget. So you sit down and say, oh, next year I'll make this much money, I'll pay this much for this. Maybe I can make a trip for this. But does the year ever happen the way you budgeted? No. And the same happens in a big enterprise. The budget is just a guide. And there's a lot wrong in the way the guide is pulled together. People don't fully understand probabilities. And even though something happened consistently in the past, they will feel much more comfortable thinking that that same thing will happen again at the same cost than to try to understand that there's some variability in it. And yes, maybe it happened at that level over 2 or 3 years, but we should still expect some range about it. Right? So people have a hard time understanding that. If we miss the budget typically gets broken down into the quarters of the year and then the quarters into months. And every month there's some analysis to see are we on budget or not on budget. If it's an annual budget, if the end of the year is considered December, for some companies, it's other times it's June 30th, whatever. The end of the year is considered December 31st. And we go into the year with a new budget, and it's the end of January, and we missed our budget by a little bit. It's pretty easy to say, oh, don't worry. Don't worry. The rest of the year, we will do better. And at the end of the year, we will be on budget. And then by February, if we miss again, it's not hard to pretend that we're going to get it done by the end of the year. A little bit harder, not hard. By September, forget it. By September, if we've missed for 9 months, but everyone will have it in their head, oh, no, some magic thing will happen in October. No, don't worry, we'll be good. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But so people have a hard time understanding how to deal with estimates and to make corrections along the way. There's sandbagging. This is term sandbagging. Anyone know what that means? I'm sorry, I'm picking on hairbrushing today. Sandbagging. What is sandbagging? No? But when it's an analogy for something, when would you use sandbags? Like you take it back and fill it with sand.
But we,
You could use it for weight. It also gets used like before a hurricane, if they expect flooding, they will fill bags with sand and make a wall out of it, right? So sandbagging and budgeting, sandbagging is at each level when we're preparing the budget, if we think, say we're running cybersecurity group, and we think next year we're going to need $50 million to run our cybersecurity group all over the world. We think we need $50 million, but we'll try to get a budget of $55 million. That extra $5 million in business that people will refer to that as sandbag. It's you put this wall there and said, don't worry, as long as I don't spend more than $55 million, I did a good job and I'm getting a bonus. Don't worry, right? But really in your mind, you thought, I only need 50 million to do what I need to do. And I have 5 million. So if something starts to go wrong, I have this kind of sandbags in place. The problem is it happens at every level. If you have a very big organization with 50,000 employees all around the world, and you get down to groups of where supervisors are managing some people, and then there's a manager. If at every level we're adding some sandbagging, this adds up to a lot of money over time. And it gets the senior management to not have faith in the number. And the senior management will just come back and say, reduce everything by 10%. We don't care. They won't even try to think about it. So the way we get there, the way we grow, 7 minutes left. The way we grow is we take the existing business, the business is useful, the way it's grown, the way it's been profitable. We might look at mergers or acquisitions, M&A, mergers and acquisitions. And we will also look at other investments. Maybe we're going to start a new product line, or maybe we're going to before, maybe we're going to go into a new geography. We're going to go into new markets. One of the problems we have in cybersecurity is most everything we do is in the red box. We design our group, we build our processes, we hire people to support the businesses, support the existing business methods. And of course, the business is thinking beyond that. The business is thinking, should we go acquire some small companies? Should we go start a new product line? If the cybersecurity group stays in the red box, all these things are going to come pouring in without anyone having thought about them from a cybersecurity perspective. So of course, there's going to be harder to manage things that we have to do. And they're going to blow our budget, right? So this is a big thing to think about in cybersecurity is how do we get proactive about being in the conversation when there are discussions about mergers and acquisitions, and when there are discussions about new projects. How do we get cybersecurity as a part of that analysis, part of that discussion? At a personal level, to engage in all of that, I would recommend these 4 things. Communicate in a business language, right? Yes, if you're doing work in cybersecurity, if you're a network analyst, you will know tons of details about the 7-layer network architecture. You will know all kinds of ways to get that assets on the network and automatically catalog them and monitor them. But when you're communicating with the business, communicate in the language, talk about value and profitability. Then they'll understand what you're saying. Also, engage. Get out of the red box. The red box needs attention, but get ahead of the red box and be part of the growth. Don't be just the necessary evil. Don't be just that department that costs us money, but be involved when there's discussion of how do we grow the business? How do we add this acquisition? Or should we do this acquisition or that acquisition? Well, cyber should do it, maybe it can help sort out. Well, if we do this one, guess how much it's going to cost to fix all the cyber issues? And if we do this one, it's not going to cost us much to fix the cyber issues. So that should be part of our decision. And then show value every day. Show value every day. 2 things. One is quick wins. Everything doesn't have to be a big long-term project. So you can do make some changes, put some improvements in that right away. Typically, I would say anything that can be done in 90 days or less without a lot of investment in new tech. You could use existing technology, but not investment in new technology. I would call it a quick win. Try to think of those things and communicate them to managers and have the managers communicating those to the senior people so that everyone recognizes, oh, this group is always trying to add value. Every day they're adding value. And also, don't lose sight of the collateral benefits. When you're putting discipline in place for cybersecurity reasons, you're also putting process discipline in place. If you're putting identity and access management controls in place, you're putting more discipline around roles and responsibilities. And make sure you make that clear to the management and to the senior management people that you deal with, that you're adding these collateral benefits. You're not just protecting things from cybersecurity basis, but you're making business overall business better. And then this one, I'm going to go against what you're hearing from everyone else and tell you your technical expertise will be obsolete. If you're studying cybersecurity today, that's great. You will get a really good job. As soon as you get a really good job, try to get out of that job. Try to get into that. Because it's not going to be long before artificial intelligence and all sorts of technologies come. All the kinds of jobs you get when you're in entry-level cybersecurity, it's like you're in a SOC, the Security Operations Center. And there's a system that's throwing alerts up, it's throwing tickets up. Oh, look at this. Professor Patrick clicked on a kidney video, go get it, right? And you're getting all these, you're getting hundreds of these all day long. And it's busy, and there's a lot of work. And people get paid good money to send an email. Professor Patrick, maybe next time, hover over the kidney video link before you click on it. If it's coming from a domain in Russia, maybe there's not a kidney on the other end, right? That's a lot of work, and people get paid good money for it. But it's not going to last. That's perfect for artificial intelligence, to be monitoring how the work is done, what was successful, what was not, and just automate it all. So once you get in, get a job, try to get yourself plugged into the first 3 here, communicating, engaging, and demonstrating that you're value. So you start getting into a management role. That's it. No, that's it. Unfortunately, I think we only have a minute or 2 for questions, not 10 minutes. But any questions?
When you talk about risk and how patents be integrated.
Yeah, so put that in a cyber context. Patents are definitely an asset that the cyber group should be trying to protect. Everyone knows the company Hewlett Packard, HP. So they were a client of mine. Anyone in HP?
My
So-
dad works there. My dad works there.
In Palo Alto?
Worked for a while in Silicon Valley.
Yeah,
I just
okay.
worked here.
So if you ever went there, their campus, it's like a university campus. It's small, like 2-story buildings. Weather's always nice, no rainy season, right? It's Bay Area. So they're always walking from building to building. And the project we were on, they were spinning off a business called Agilent, which was their medical devices business. And so we were helping them with spinning off Agilent. And I remember I was walking through one building and HP, everything's cubicles. Even the CFO, she had a cubicle half the size of this room, but it was a cubicle. Right, and so everyone was in cubicles. And I remember I was walking through one building and there were file folders, you know, like manila file folders, like spread open, and in green magic marker, it said stop with X's. Go another way. This is patents and royalties area. I was like, like, but yeah, so you need to protect it. When you think about it, the other side of it is not only having the patent is important, but what will it cost to protect the patent? What will it cost to protect it? Right? Because you could have a patent on something and competitors could basically mimic what you're doing. I think somebody had a patent on shopping carts for online shopping a long time ago. And everyone was like, okay, I mean, everybody comes up with shopping carts, but there is a company, anyone heard of Zenith? Z-E-N-I-T-H, Zenith? A long time, even before me, Zenith was a big television manufacturer. And the company still exists. They don't make TVs anymore. They haven't made TVs for 50 years. 15, like, maybe 40 years. But they still exist because they have patents. Like when even on a computer screen, there's a refresh rate where when the electrons are being shot across the screen. Zenith has patents on that. And so there's an office in a suburb of Chicago with the Zenith sign on it that looks like it's from the 1940s, because it is from the 1940s, and they have some patents, and the money just keeps coming. So maybe not, you're not going to be Hitachi or Samsung, but you can have a nice office in the suburbs and do a lot of money. Any other questions? Sorry, go ahead. Oh, I thought you were. Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Professor. Yeah. Well, you know, yeah, we're getting, well, there's now with cybersecurity professionals, especially with a lot of the older ones, everyone would get right up. But now there's a whole mantra of normalize the breach. Like it's going to happen. The breaches are going to happen. So it's more, look, floods and hurricanes happen, right? And you watch them on the news. Companies have liquidity problems. And all those 17 things happen all the time, right? It's just how do we plan to, like, not just survive them, but thrive while those things happen. And there's, I think, to your point, there's a bigger one. I'm going to get the name on. Is it Signer-Base? Signer-Base? There's an intermediary company. Every time you text or you share data through a mobile carrier, it doesn't matter if it's T-Mobile, who it is. It all goes through this company called Signer-Base. And they just found that they were if someone can Google it, I think it's SYNIRC. But they had hackers in their system since like 2012, but they just found out. So basically, every text message anyone sent since 2012, you go to log in your bank account and it says, "Oh, I'm going to send you a 6-digit code." Type it. Wow, like somebody's been watching that for almost a decade.
Anyway, go ahead. I have a quick question. Is there like a solution like that protects the cyber rights?
There's data privacy rights for sure. That's a whole area. And initially that was coming together as almost its own group. But in many businesses now you see those together, cybersecurity and data privacy. There's back to that. Is anyone Google it? Can someone Google Signerverse breach? You Google like Signerverse breach messaging or something. I'm sure it'll come. But anyway, those two fit together really well. One of the things you can do in cybersecurity that's a good protection is get rid of stuff. Like why do we keep data that we don't? Why do we have devices that we don't? Why do we have things attached to that that can't be attached to that? A long time ago, when I was in university, I was general manager of a radio station. College radio in the US, in Vermont. In the US, if you're a radio station, the Federal Communications Commission makes you keep a log. Every day you have to keep a log of some readings from the equipment and things that went on, right? Every day. You have to keep those logs for 3 years. Maybe it's different now, but this was back then 3 years. When I was going to become the general manager the next year, the general manager that was the year before me, we were meeting, going over different things. And one of the things he showed me, which has always stuck with me, is he said, when you come in, each day when you come in this office, go to these files, go to the last file in here and take it and shred it. It was the log from 3 years and 1 day ago. Right? Take this file, whatever, before you do anything, get this file and shred it. Because there's no good reason to have that around anymore, right? And it's the same in a lot of businesses. Why do we need data if it isn't part of our operations? It's only going to create a risk. Right? Some bad actor will want it, or it's going to hurt us some. Did anyone find it? Sign up first. Is it? Did I spell it right?
It's SYNIDERS.
Yeah. And how far back? 2012 was it? Or?
Yeah, this is a 2021 article that says covered a 5-year-old for each.
5 years. Okay.
Maybe
2016.
2016. Oh, yeah.
I exaggerated again. 2012. This is only every single text message since 2016. Oh my God. Any other questions? Good. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Professor. Both professors. And that was done for the day. Remember your deadlines. Also, please remember that at 4:30 we have the presentation for the entrepreneurship channel. So anybody who wants to come and watch, wants to participate, now we got it. 4:30 today.
Bueno, chiquilla, ¿cómo está?